Okay, let's get to our panel. Zhang Weiwei in Shanghai. Let me start with you. So the 19th Party Congress has finished its work. President Xi Jinping has been re-elected General Secretary of the Central Committee and has presented the new CPC leadership in Beijing. He also laid down a roadmap for the next 5 years. What are your thoughts on the new leadership and the road ahead?
Well, this leadership is actually what I describe the China model at work, on display before our eyes, the model of meritocracy. If you look at the membership, one of the top 7 or all the members of top 7 in the decision-making body, actually most of them have worked twice as a governor or party secretary of province, which means most of them have already governed over 100 million people before they came to this position. And furthermore, all of them were born in the 1950s. So this is a special generation of cadres. They went through some hardship during the Cultural Revolution, either went to countryside or went to work in the factories. So this is a generation which knows China's grassroots and how the Chinese society operates. They have more touch with the Chinese, with ordinary people. And so it's a competent leadership. I think it's great for China's next stage of development.
Cheng Li, what are your views? We have a new Politburo standing committee that's been announced. What are some of the common qualities of this group in terms of experience, expertise in their respective fields?
Well, of course, I agree with Zhang Weiwei said. It's really a unique generation in Chinese history, probably in human history, because they grew up during the Cultural Revolution. They went through a lot of changes, witnessed China from a very poor country emerge as a global power. And this is a generation with a combination of idealism and pragmatism, which is quite unusual. Now, all of them had a very solid experience, in locality, and just I can mention some of them. Li Zhansu served as provincial leader in 4 provinces, in 4 areas of China, from Hebei, Heilongjiang, and Shanxi, and Guizhou. And Wang, as we know, that he has great reputation as an economic administrator, and also served as the party boss in Guangdong and Chongqing, when it's the largest province, when it's the largest city in the world, and also served as in the State Council, first as Deputy Secretary General, and last 5 years as Vice Premier. And Zhao Leji is a person moved from the inland China, and a really solid grassroots experience, particularly emphasized on poverty reduction, and made his mark. And Wang Funing is a colleague of, former colleague of Zhang Weiwei, and taught at the Fudan, is a law professor, dean of law school, and he was a brand for 3 top leaders, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and now Xi Jinping. And his rise represented the rise of think tanks in China. And also Han Zheng is a very capable mayor, and later became party secretary, economic technocrat. So that the shared emphasis on economic development in China is very, very important. Now, let me also mention that these 7 bodies, except Xi Jinping, 2 people, Li Zhansu and Zhao Leji, are very much promoted by Xi Jinping and Xi Jinping's protege. But Li Keqiang and Wang Yang really advanced their career from the Chinese Communist Youth League. They were proteges of Hu Jintao. And finally, that Han Zheng and Wang Funing, both of them moved their career from Shanghai, very close to Jiang Zemin, another former predecessor for Xi Jinping. Now you see that this is collective leadership, the team of rivals together. I think this really represents the different interest groups and working together. The party is consolidated, is united together. That should uplift the public confidence, and also should be well received by international community, in my view.
Wang Guan, what is the role of the Politburo Standing Committee? How important is it in pushing forward the goals that the country wants to get ahead with?
Well, the Standing Committee is the most powerful organization, decision-making body in this Chinese Communist Party hierarchical system. Usually it deliberates, discusses, and legislate party policies, also party platforms, when the Politburo and the larger Central Committee is not in session, chances are their deliberation, their policies will find their way into China's national policies in the National People's Congress, which is China's parliament, kicks off the spring afterwards. I would also like to point out that this is really a very nice mix of people from across the country. Their portfolio of experiences span across the entire China. Zhao Leji served a long time in Western Chinese hinterland province of Qinghai. In fact, Han Zheng, Wang Huning rose from Eastern China's coastal Shanghai, and also southern Guangdong province, where Wang Yang was the party secretary, and also Li Jianshu served a long time in Hebei. On top of the legislative work inside the Politburo Standing Committee, chances are these people will also take top government and party jobs in charge of China's NPC, the Chinese parliament, also a top political advisory body called the CPPCC, China's anti-graft, anti-corruption body, as well as running day-to-day works, serving as vice premier of China's cabinet. So expectations are that they can bring their portfolio of experience to legislate and debate and move this country forward in the next 5 years.
Stephen, the world has been watching these events unfolding in Beijing over the last week. How important is this Congress, not just for China, but for the world?
Oh, I think it's terribly important. This is going to answer the question as to is the vision laid out by Xi Jinping during the 19th Party Congress going to be implemented? I mean, the vision, in a lot of ways, is the vision that any leader of any country would have. Be a peaceful, prosperous part of world development, have an equal society, where the rich and poor don't have the conflicts that they have. It's a vision that an American president actually might lay out, that we should be peaceful and prosperous towards our neighbors. We should not interfere with their sovereignty. The Standing Committee and the Politburo are going to be the people that implement that. In the last 5 years, we've seen some of the vision implemented. We've seen some of the vision not implemented. And one would suspect that it wasn't implemented because there were people on the Standing Committee, on the Politburo, who didn't necessarily agree with it. Now we have more agreement within the Standing Committee and the Politburo to implement that vision. So it's incredibly important to every country in the world who these people are and how they implement these policies.
Yukon Huang, let's talk about the economy. The new team is now in place. The Communist Party has two goals. First, to build a moderately prosperous society, and then to transform China into a great modern socialist country. What kind of fundamental transformation can we expect?
Well, we've seen consolidation of power. We've seen bringing in a variety of interests. I think this is very cohesive. If you ask what are the policies, is Xi Jinping going to be what I call transformative leader? Mao and Dong were seen as transformative leaders to change the nature of China. What has the Party Congress been emphasizing? It's laid out a two-stage program to move China, to modernize China over the next 35 years. They've also pointed out what I call contradiction. The contradiction is slightly different from the past. They basically say that the problem is unbalanced. By that, they mean inequality, social, environmental, spatial, a broader range of issues. So you have what I call two themes, trying to address this kind of imbalance in a proper way, and also to bring China into the modern age, into a global economy. And I think this is a package of what I call economic policies to address rural areas, the inner provinces, social, environmental needs, and for modernization, innovation, financial systems, raising China's external impact in terms of trade and foreign investments to the same levels that would be expected of a modern and more powerful nation. So this kind of dual theme is what I see as the economic priorities over the coming decades.
Zhang Weiwei, again at this Congress, when we talk about the economy, we saw the emphasis on long-term economic planning. How important is long-term economic planning to China as it moves forward?
Well, it's very important. Actually, if you look at the party congresses in the past, usually they look into the next 5 years. Well, this one, 19th Congress, actually looked into next 30 years. And this kind of long-term planning is not the Soviet type of planning, which was really mandatory planning, how many cigarettes people will consume a year. This is wrong. China has practiced since reform started what we call the indicative planning or strategic planning. Essentially, it's about the orientation, about the priorities. Say, in the case of Shanghai, a long time ago, the central planning decided that we should focus on high-end manufacturing, on service industries. Then the whole city moved along this new approach, and it worked. So this is a very important strategic planning for the China model, for China's modernization.
Cheng Li, if we look ahead, if China achieves its goal, what kind of economic powerhouse will we be looking at in 2035?
Well, it's very difficult to imagine. I think that by that time, according to current trajectory, China will become the largest economy in the world. And also China's middle class will be a very big size. And China's urban development still has tremendous room for further development. But most importantly, China pursued the new economic model, as Dr. Wang just mentioned, not a single-minded GDP growth, but also inclusiveness and the green development. So that is what Chinese call unbalanced, inadequate, as Xi Jinping's, the two terms Xi Jinping constantly emphasized in his work report. So which means that China will be more environmentally friendly. China will pay more attention to poverty reduction, and to really to develop in a new model, whether it be e-commerce, whether it be innovation-driven, and particularly to deal with serious challenges of the artificial intelligence in the future. So I think in these areas that China moving to the front. But of course, China needs to have a conducive environment, with its neighboring countries. And China, as Xi Jinping said, it should not just like replace United States, become hegemony. No, it's like Steve Orlins said, it's a more peaceful development. If we really believe economic liberalization, if we really believe trade and foreign investment should be win-win. But I hope that China's market will remain open, and the market access and intellectual property rights will be more respectfully implemented. This can reflect the concern of foreign companies at this moment.
You mentioned innovation. How will China develop in terms of innovation, research, development?
Well, actually, China paid a lot of attention to this. Actually, it's not entirely new. It's about 15 to 20 years. If you go to Chinese bookstores, there are so many books about innovation. But only in the past couple of years, that become more evident in the international community, largely because of the Chinese products and the Chinese e-commerce model and the Chinese technological-oriented company become more competitiveness. So this kind of development is very, very important. China is still in the early stage of development. So that should be a wake-up call for a country like the United States. We should not ignore, we should not think that China is only steal our technology. Exactly. With this kind of mentality, will undermine American interests and make us less competitive. Another thing is China will continue to emphasize infrastructure development, and particularly with natural gas, not so much about the oil-driven car, but the electronic car. China already adopted the policy. So under Xi Jinping, that will be more vigorously reinforced. That's a very important development for China's potential.
Yukon Huang, a big goal for the Chinese leadership, providing a better life for all Chinese people. But one big challenge is inequality, income inequality, wealth inequality. How does it close those gaps?
Well, let me start off by responding to your question about what China's going to look like at the end of this period of time. By 2049, let's say 30 years from now, an economy which grows at 5% a year will double in size every 14, 15 years. So here's China, $10,000 per capita, doubles to 20, to 40. Can you imagine a China which is 4 times as large in terms of its sheer economic size? That's a big issue. But then the inequality, as you mentioned, is a big issue. Urban areas have incomes which are 3 times as high as rural. The coastal provinces have incomes which are twice as high as the interior. These are actually the highest ratios we've seen of any country. But they also illustrate something about the potential in China, because urbanization can drive growth. Productivity shifts from coastal areas to the interior can drive growth. So you're going to see a change. The central provinces, the interior provinces, are going to grow faster than the coastal provinces over the coming decades. So inequality indicators are going to moderate. That's, I think, part of this unbalanced process. And this also means that China can devote more resources to education, health, environmental issues. China's budget, by Western standards, is very small, which is unusual for a socialist economy. So this signaling also fiscal reforms, which will transform more resources to the state. So when they talk about the state playing a more prominent role, I think it's a more prominent role in addressing some of these, what I call these imbalances, these inequities, environmental considerations, along with the fact that this economy is going to grow very rapidly.
Right, but that's significant change you're talking about there when interior provinces start growing at a faster rate than coastal provinces.
And just think of what's been happening in the last 10 years. The rapid high-speed rail network is basically north-south corridors, east-west corridors. Previously, in a China which is basically globalizing and export, activities concentrated along the coast. Now you're starting to unify the countries from the north and south and the west and the interior, so the focus of activity is starting to move inland. Couple this with a huge consumer market, 200, 300, 400 million middle-income consumers spread equally across China, you basically see a pattern where growth is now becoming more even than it has been in the past.
Stephen Orlins, another big challenge for China, market access for foreign investors. There have been complaints about this already. China is now promising that it will ease up on access for foreign investors. How big is that for a global business audience?
I think it's huge. I was pleased to hear Xi Jinping in his speech say that all businesses established in China will be treated fairly and the same. So that means that if a wholly owned foreign enterprise is invested in China and is competing with a state-owned enterprise or a Chinese private enterprise, that they will be treated equally. Well, that's tremendous, because that is not the case today, that there are lots of impediments to investment. There are restrictions in terms, there's certain industries foreigners cannot invest in. There's certain industries where there are caps on investment. There's certain industries where state-owned enterprises are effectively the monopolist in it. So the question is this new leadership going to be able to implement these policies? Well, at first glance, it looks terrific. We've heard all the panelists describe. These are extremely well-qualified people, not only the Standing Committee, but the full Politburo. They've all trained for these jobs for a lifetime. Are they going to be able to implement this vision? And if they can, we're going to see China integrate into the world community even more than it has up till now. If they can't, there is the risk of reciprocal blocks on Chinese investment in other countries, which I think would be terrible both for the other countries and for China. So the question is, how are these visions going to be implemented?
But given what we've seen over the past week, we should be encouraged, shouldn't we?
I'm encouraged. Certainly the vision is one which I can share. I mean, when you look at and that he included Belt Road Initiative in the speech, I've taken the position that Belt Road Initiative is not only good for the countries in which China's investing in, China's providing funding for, but it's good for the world. Lifting people out of poverty is a good thing. Taking places where poverty breeds terrorism and lifting those people out of poverty will reduce terrorism globally. This is something America should be fully behind. American businesses can participate with Chinese businesses in the Belt Road Initiative, and we hope that happens. If that all occurs, it's going to be, the vision is going to be realized. But the question is always, how will it be implemented?
Right, I want to pick up on one of your points there. Wang, lifting people out of poverty, poverty alleviation, that's a big issue for China. We've seen over the past few decades how China has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. How ambitious are China's plans to lift even more people out of poverty?
Well, if you look at the track record, also the policy manifestations for the next 5 years, the CPC is trying to make sure two things happen to alleviate poverty. First is growth, development. The second is innovation. Growth is good for jobs. For the past 5 years, we observed an average annual growth of 7.4%. That growth is certainly good for jobs. That kept unemployment rate low to as low as 4.8% as of September this year. Also, innovation is important. I want to echo Dr. Li's comment about Chinese innovation a few moments ago, in that China is becoming increasingly innovative. If you break down President Xi and General Secretary Xi's report at the opening session, he mentioned innovation 60 times. And also mentioned reform 70 times. Those are not just empty slogans. If you look at what happened in the past 5 years, the application of patents went up 70%. Also, the number of R&D, research and development expenditure went up 60%. People living in China felt this strongly. They're entering into a cashless society, which is good for poverty alleviation. I'll give you one quick example. In western hinterland province of Gansu, the local government is trying to set up workshops to help farmers sell their products, farm produce online. 20,000 such workshops, so farmers can sell their apples, oranges, and vegetables through online platforms in alliance with Alibaba, China's largest online platform sales platforms. So all those things are good for poverty alleviation.
Okay, we need to take a quick break. There's much more to discuss as we look back at the 19th Party Congress and look ahead to China's new era. You're watching a CGTN special program, Moving China Forward. Stay with us.